Hashtag the alien girl was captivated by the human at first sight. The morning sun cast long shadows across the landing platform of Station Zirion 7, the largest trading post in the Andromeda sector. Ships from dozens of worlds docked here daily, their crews bringing exotic goods, strange technologies, and tales from distant stars. Today was different, though none of the bustling aliens walking the metal corridors knew it yet. Zara pressed her face against the observation window of her transport ship, her large violet eyes reflecting the swirling lights of the station's docking bay. At 19 standard years old, she was considered barely an adult by Calorian standards, yet she carried herself with the grace expected of her noble bloodline. Her pale blue skin shimmered with nervous energy, and the delicate crystalline patterns that marked her as royalty pulsed with a soft inner light. "Princess, we should prepare for departure," her guardian Thex said, his deep voice carrying the weight of authority. The massive reptilian being stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled hide bearing the ceremonial markings of the Royal Guard. "The Earth delegation will be arriving soon, and your father expects a full report on the human trade proposals." Zara nodded absently, but her attention remained fixed on the viewport. She had heard stories about humans for most of her life, tales of their incredible resilience, their tendency to survive in impossible situations, and their strange ability to form bonds with almost any species they encountered. The Calorian Empire had been watching Earth for decades, fascinated by these unusual beings who seemed to defy every law of natural selection. "Tell me again about their world, Thex," she said, finally turning from the window. "What makes them so different from us?" The old warrior's eyes crinkled with something that might have been amusement. "They come from a death world, princess, a planet where everything wants to kill everything else. Their sun burns their skin, their atmosphere is filled with poison they somehow breathe, and their gravity is so strong it would crush most civilized species. Yet somehow they not only survive, but thrive. And they're coming here to trade with us? More than that, they're offering to share their defensive technologies in exchange for our medical knowledge. Your father believes this could be the beginning of a powerful alliance." Zara felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. She had studied human culture extensively, fascinated by their art, their music, and their literature. Unlike most Calorian nobles, who viewed other species as curiosities at best, she genuinely wanted to understand these strange beings from the edges of known space. A deep vibration ran through the station's hull, indicating the arrival of another ship. Zara hurried back to the viewport, pressing her hands against the cool metal as she watched a sleek vessel emerge from the quantum fold. The ship was unlike anything she had ever seen, angular and aggressive, yet somehow beautiful in its brutal efficiency. Burn marks along its hull suggested it had seen combat recently, and Zara found herself wondering what dangers these humans had faced to reach their station. "That's them," Thex confirmed, checking his communication device. "The diplomatic vessel Defiant from the Terran Federation. They've been traveling for 3 months to reach us." As the human ship settled into its assigned docking bay, Zara watched in fascination as the boarding tube extended to connect with their airlock. Her heart raced with anticipation. In just a few minutes, she would see her first human in person. "Princess, perhaps we should retire to the diplomatic quarters," Thex suggested. "It would not be appropriate for you to gawk at our guests like a common tourist." "Just a few more minutes," Zara pleaded. "I want to see them emerge." "Please." Thex sighed but did not object. He had been Zara's guardian since childhood and knew better than to argue when she set her mind to something. Besides, her curiosity about other cultures was one of her most endearing traits, even if it sometimes led her into trouble. The airlock cycled, and Zara held her breath as the first humans stepped onto the station. There were 5 of them, all wearing what appeared to be formal diplomatic attire, dark blue uniforms with silver trim that somehow managed to look both elegant and practical. They moved with a fluid grace that surprised her, each step calculated and purposeful. But it was the last human to emerge who captured her complete attention. He was tall by human standards, though still shorter than most Calorians, with dark hair and warm brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around him with quiet intensity. His skin was a golden brown color that reminded Zara of the sunrise over her homeworld's crystal mountains. When he smiled at something one of his companions said, his whole face transformed, radiating a warmth that made something flutter deep in Zara's chest. "Who is he?" she whispered, unable to look away. Thex consulted his datapad. "Commander Marcus Chun, according to their diplomatic manifest. He's listed as a military liaison and cultural attaché." Marcus. The name rolled around in Zara's mind like music. She watched as he gestured to his team, apparently giving directions about their equipment. Even from this distance, she could see the easy way he interacted with his subordinates, respectful, but clearly in command. There was something about his bearing that spoke of strength held in check, of power used only when necessary. "He's beautiful," she breathed, then immediately felt her skin flush a deeper shade of blue as she realized she had spoken aloud. "Princess." Thex's voice carried a warning tone. "These are important diplomatic guests, not potential romantic interests. Your father would not approve of such thoughts." But Zara barely heard him. As if sensing her attention, Marcus looked up toward the observation deck. For just a moment, their eyes met across the vast expanse of the docking bay. Zara felt her breath catch in her throat as his gaze found hers. He couldn't possibly see her clearly from that distance, yet something in his expression suggested he was looking directly at her. Then he smiled, not the polite, diplomatic smile he had worn for his companions, but something warmer and more genuine. He raised one hand in what might have been a greeting or simply an acknowledgement of her presence. Zara felt her heart skip a beat as she pressed closer to the viewport, forgetting entirely about propriety or diplomatic protocol. "We need to go," Thex said firmly, taking her arm. "The welcome ceremony begins in 1 hour, and you need to be properly prepared." Reluctantly, Zara allowed herself to be led away from the viewport, but she couldn't stop thinking about that moment of connection. Something had passed between them. She was sure of it. The humans had a word for it. She remembered from her cultural studies. Love at first sight. She had always assumed it was merely a quaint myth, a romantic notion with no basis in reality. Now she wasn't so sure. The diplomatic quarters assigned to the Calorian delegation were luxurious by any standard, with sweeping views of a nebula beyond the station and furnishings crafted from the finest materials in the galaxy. Zara barely noticed any of it as she prepared for the welcome ceremony. Her mind kept drifting back to that brief moment of eye contact with the human commander. "Princess, you must focus," her personal attendant Lyra chittered, the insectoid being's mandibles clicking with frustration. "The ceremonial robes will not arrange themselves properly if you keep fidgeting." "Sorry," Zara murmured, forcing herself to stand still as Lyra adjusted the flowing fabric of her formal wear. The deep purple robes were woven with threads of precious metal that caught and reflected light, creating patterns that seemed to move of their own accord. They were beautiful, traditional, and utterly boring compared to the simple elegance of the human uniform she had observed. "There," Lyra announced with satisfaction. "You look every inch the princess you were born to be. Your father will be pleased." Zara studied her reflection in the full-length mirror and saw exactly what Lyra described, a perfect example of Calorian nobility, elegant and untouchable. The crystal patterns on her skin glowed softly in harmony with her robes, and her long silver hair had been arranged in the traditional style worn by unmarried females of royal blood. "Lyra," she said suddenly, "what do you know about human mating customs?" The attendant's antennae twitched with surprise. "Princess? Why would you ask such a thing?" "Just curious. I've been studying their culture, and I noticed they seem to have very different approaches to relationships than we do." "Well," Lyra said carefully, "from what I understand, humans are quite informal about such matters. They often choose their own mates based on emotional attachment rather than political or genetic compatibility." "Very primitive, really. Or very romantic," Zara countered. "Princess, surely you're not thinking of the human delegation? Your father has very specific plans for your future, and they certainly don't include alien entanglements." Zara sighed. She knew Lyra was right, of course. As the only child of Emperor Keldon, her marriage would eventually be arranged to strengthen political alliances and ensure the continuation of the royal bloodline. Love was a luxury she could not afford, especially not with an alien whose people were still considered little more than an interesting curiosity by most of the galaxy. But when she closed her eyes, she could still see Marcus's face, the warmth in his dark eyes, the genuine quality of his smile. There had been something there, she was certain of it. Something worth exploring, even if it led nowhere. A soft chime indicated that it was time to proceed to the main diplomatic hall. Zara took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and prepared to meet the humans in her official capacity as Princess of Calorian. Whatever personal feelings she might have developed would have to wait. The diplomatic hall was a marvel of engineering, its transparent walls offering an unobstructed view of space while sophisticated force fields kept the vacuum at bay. Representatives from a dozen different species filled the chamber, their various forms creating a colorful tapestry of galactic civilization. At the center of it all stood the human delegation, looking small, but somehow significant among the larger alien forms. Emperor Keldon commanded attention from his position on the raised platform at the head of the hall. Tall and imposing even by Calorian standards, he wore the deep black robes of state that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His crystal patterns pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm that indicated absolute confidence and control. Honored representatives of the Terran Federation, he began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. We welcome you to our space, and hope this meeting will mark the beginning of a long and profitable relationship between our peoples. Zara took her place at her father's side, trying to maintain the serene expression expected of Calorian royalty while her eyes searched the human delegation. Marcus stood slightly apart from his companions, and she noticed he seemed to be scanning the crowd as well. When his gaze found hers again, she felt that same electric connection she had experienced at the docking bay. This time, she was close enough to see his eyes widen slightly with surprise. He had been looking for her, she realized with a thrill of excitement. He remembered their brief moment of contact as clearly as she did. The human ambassador, a distinguished woman with silver hair and sharp blue eyes, stepped forward to respond to the Emperor's greeting. Your Majesty, we are honored by your welcome and grateful for this opportunity to discuss matters of mutual benefit. The Terran Federation hopes to establish lasting bonds of friendship and cooperation with the Calorian Empire. As the formal speeches continued, Zara found herself paying more attention to Marcus than to the diplomatic proceedings. She watched the way he held himself, alert but relaxed, ready for anything but not expecting trouble. There was something about his bearing that suggested he had seen real combat, yet he carried himself with the dignity of a born diplomat. When the ambassador mentioned human defensive technologies, Marcus stepped forward to provide technical details. His voice was deep and resonant, with an accent that Zara found utterly fascinating. He spoke with confidence and authority, clearly knowing his subject matter intimately, yet he managed to explain complex concepts in terms that even the most exotic alien species could understand. Our shield technology is based on principles that we've had to develop out of necessity, he explained, activating a holographic display that showed various human defensive systems. Living on a death world means we've had to become very good at protecting ourselves from hostile environments. And from hostile aliens, added one of the other human representatives with a grin that showed entirely too many teeth. Several of the alien delegates shifted nervously at this reminder of humanity's reputation as warriors, but Marcus simply nodded calmly. When necessary, yes, but we much prefer to make friends rather than enemies. As he said this, his eyes found Zara's once again, and she could swear she saw something more than diplomatic courtesy in his expression. There was warmth there, and interest, and perhaps something deeper that made her pulse quicken. The formal ceremony concluded with the presentation of gifts, a traditional Calorian crystal sculpture for the humans, and a collection of Earth artifacts for the Imperial collection. Zara watched with fascination as Marcus presented her father with something called a rose, a delicate organic creation that somehow managed to be both beautiful and thoroughly alien. On Earth, we give these to people we wish to honor, Marcus explained. This particular variety was grown in our diplomatic gardens and has been genetically modified to survive in various atmospheric conditions. Emperor Keldon accepted the gift with appropriate dignity, but Zara could see he was genuinely intrigued by the elegant simplicity of the gesture. Humans, it seemed, had a talent for making even the most formal occasions feel personal. As the crowd began to disperse into smaller groups for more informal discussions, Zara found herself hoping for a chance to speak with Marcus directly. She had so many questions about human culture, about Earth, about him. But before she could find an opportunity to approach, Thex appeared at her side. "Princess, your father wishes to speak with you privately," he rumbled. "The human delegation will be here for several days. There will be other opportunities for cultural exchange." Zara nodded reluctantly, knowing that duty came before personal desire. But as she followed Thex toward the private chambers, she couldn't help but look back one more time. Marcus was deep in conversation with several alien diplomats. But, as if he sensed her attention, he turned and caught her eye. This time, his smile was definitely meant for her alone. The private audience chamber was smaller than the main diplomatic hall, but no less impressive, its walls lined with artifact from across the Calorian Empire's long history. Emperor Keldon stood before the great window that looked out onto the swirling colors of a nebula, his hands clasped behind his back in the pose Zara remembered from childhood. "You were watching the human commander very intently during the ceremony," he said without turning around. Zara felt her skin flush, but she kept her voice level. "I find our culture fascinating, Father. Commander Chun seems very knowledgeable about their defensive technologies." "Indeed." The Emperor turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "What did you think of their presentation?" "Impressive," she admitted. "Their approach to problem-solving is very different from ours. Where we would use brute force or advanced technology, they seem to prefer elegance and efficiency." "An interesting observation. And what did you think of the humans themselves?" This was dangerous ground. Zara chose her words carefully. "They seem more individual than most species we've encountered. Even in a formal diplomatic setting, each of them maintained their own personality. It's quite refreshing, actually." Emperor Keldon nodded slowly. "Yes, I noticed that as well. Most species send delegates who are essentially interchangeable, trained to say exactly what their governments want them to say. These humans feel more authentic. Does that concern you?" "On the contrary, I find it intriguing. A species that values individual thought over collective conformity might be exactly the kind of ally we need for the challenges ahead." Zara felt a flicker of hope. If her father was favorably impressed with the humans, perhaps there might be opportunities for further cultural exchange. Opportunities to learn more about Marcus and his fascinating people. "Father, would it be possible for me to participate in some of the cultural exchange programs? I could help our guests understand Calorian customs while learning about human traditions." The Emperor studied her for a long moment, and Zara had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her diplomatic language to the personal interest beneath. But when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than disapproving. "An interesting proposal. It would certainly be valuable for you to gain experience in diplomatic relations before you take on more formal responsibilities." "Very well. You may serve as a cultural liaison during their visit. But remember, daughter, you are representing not just yourself, but the entire Calorian Empire. I trust you will conduct yourself with appropriate dignity." "Of course, Father. Thank you." As she left the audience chamber, Zara could barely contain her excitement. She would have legitimate reasons to spend time with Marcus, to learn about his world and his people. Whatever this feeling was that had sparked between them at first sight, she would have the chance to explore it properly. She only hoped she would have the courage to act on what she discovered. Hashtag the alien girl was captivated by the human at first sight. Part 2, the cultural exchange, began the next morning in one of the station's neutral meeting rooms, a space designed to accommodate beings of vastly different physiologies and environmental needs. Zara arrived early, her nerves making the crystal patterns on her skin pulse with irregular rhythms that she hoped weren't too obvious. She had spent most of the previous night researching everything she could find about human customs and etiquette, determined not to embarrass herself or her people. Marcus was already there when she entered, studying a holographic display of Calorian art with intense concentration. He had traded his formal diplomatic uniform for more casual clothing, simple dark pants, and a shirt that seemed to be made from some kind of organic fiber. The change made him seem more approachable, less like a distant diplomatic figure, and more like someone she might actually be able to talk to. "Good morning, Commander," she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded despite the rapid beating of her hearts. He turned at the sound of her voice, and that warm smile she remembered from yesterday spread across his features. "Please call me Marcus. And good morning to you as well, Princess. I have to say, your father's art collection is extraordinary." Some of these pieces must be thousands of years old. Many are much older than that, Zara replied, moving to stand beside him at the display. This one, for instance, was created over 10,000 years ago by the artist Veltar during our classical period. The crystal formations actually respond to the viewer's emotional state. As if to prove her point, the crystalline sculpture in the hologram began to glow with soft blue and purple lights that seemed to dance in response to their proximity. Marcus watched in fascination as the patterns shifted and evolved. "That's incredible," he said. "On Earth, we have art that changes based on external conditions, temperature, humidity, that sort of thing, but nothing that responds to emotions. How does it work?" "Colorians naturally emit low-level psychic fields," Zara explained. "The crystals are grown in such a way that they resonate with those fields. It's not magic, just a natural phenomenon that our artists learn to harness." "Psychic fields?" Marcus's eyebrows rose with interest rather than skepticism. "That would explain some of the things I've noticed about your people. There seems to be an undercurrent of communication beyond just words and body language." Zara was impressed by his perceptiveness. Most aliens either dismissed Colorian psychic abilities as superstition or treated them with fear and suspicion. "You're very observant. Most species don't pick up on our empathic connections so quickly." "Well, humans have had to become good at reading social cues to survive. When you're dealing with alien species on a regular basis, being able to sense underlying emotions can mean the difference between successful diplomacy and accidentally starting a war." They spent the next hour discussing various aspects of Colorian culture, with Zara finding herself increasingly impressed by Marcus's genuine curiosity and understanding. Unlike many aliens she had met, he didn't seem to view her people as exotic curiosities, but as complex individuals with their own motivations and desires. When she explained the significance of the crystal patterns that marked Colorian nobility, he listened with the same attention he had given to technical military briefings. "So the patterns are actually hereditary?" he asked, gesturing toward the delicate tracery that decorated Zara's temples and cheekbones. "To some extent, yes. Each family line has its own basic pattern, but they evolve with each generation. Mine are quite different from my father's, though you can see the similarities if you know what to look for." "They're beautiful," Marcus said, and something in his tone made Zara's skin flush with warmth. "The way they catch the light. It's like you're wearing jewelry made of starlight." No one had ever described her patterns that way before. Colorian males typically appreciated them for their genetic significance or their indication of noble bloodlines. The fact that Marcus saw them as beautiful for their own sake made something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with diplomatic relations. "Thank you," she said softly. "Would you like to tell me about Earth? I've studied your planet extensively, but I imagine the reality is quite different from academic descriptions." Marcus's expression grew thoughtful, and for a moment Zara saw something that might have been homesickness cross his features. "It's a harsh world by most standards, but it's beautiful in its own way. The skies change color constantly, blue during the day, but they can turn red or purple or orange when our sun sets. And the diversity of life forms is incredible. We have forests that stretch for thousands of kilometers, oceans so deep we're still discovering new species in them, and ice caps that have existed for millions of years." "It sounds dangerous," Zara said, remembering what she had learned about Earth's hostile environment. "It is," Marcus admitted, "but that's part of what makes it special. Every sunrise is a victory, every sunset a promise that you've survived another day. It teaches you to appreciate things that other species might take for granted." "Like what?" "Like the feeling of rain on your skin, or the way flowers smell after a storm. The sound of wind through trees, or the sight of stars reflected on still water. Earth doesn't give you anything for free, but that makes the beautiful moments even more precious." Zara found herself hanging on his every word, captivated not just by what he was saying, but by the way he said it. There was a passion in his voice when he talked about his home world that spoke of deep emotional connections, of a love for his planet that went beyond mere patriotism. "You miss it," she observed. "Every day," he admitted. "But that's the price of exploration, isn't it? To see new worlds and meet new people, sometimes you have to leave the things you love behind. Do you ever regret it? Leaving Earth to travel among the stars?" Marcus considered the question seriously before answering. "Sometimes. But then I have experiences like this, meeting someone like you, learning about cultures I never could have imagined. And I remember why I chose this life. The universe is vast and full of wonders. It would be a shame to spend my entire existence on just one world, no matter how beautiful it might be. The compliment was subtle, but Zara caught it anyway, and she felt her skin warm with pleasure. He had included meeting her among the wonders that made his travels worthwhile. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt significant. They were interrupted by the arrival of other delegates, a group of insectoid traders from the Hive Collective who wanted to learn about human industrial techniques. Marcus greeted them with professional courtesy, but Zara noticed he seemed less enthusiastic about the interruption than she did about continuing their private conversation. The rest of the morning was spent in group discussions, with representatives from various species sharing information about their cultures and technologies. Zara found herself watching Marcus as he interacted with the other aliens, noting how he adapted his communication style to each species' preferences and limitations. With the logical Vulcan-like Zephyrians, he was precise and analytical. With the emotional Deltan empaths, he was warm and open. With the aggressive Klingon-style warriors from Gorax Prime, he was direct and respectful of their martial culture. But when he talked to her, she noticed his manner was different again, more personal somehow, as if he were speaking to her not as a representative of her species, but as an individual he was genuinely interested in getting to know. During a break in the formal proceedings, Marcus approached her again. "I was wondering," he said, "would you be interested in seeing some of our ship? I could give you a tour of human technology, show you how we've adapted our equipment for deep space travel." Zara felt a thrill of excitement at the invitation. Visiting a human ship would give her unprecedented insight into their culture and technology. More importantly, it would give her another opportunity to spend time with Marcus away from the formal diplomatic environment. "I would be honored," she replied. "When would be convenient? How about this afternoon? The other members of our delegation will be busy with technical discussions that I suspect might bore you." "That sounds perfect." As they made arrangements for the visit, Zara found herself wondering if this was proper protocol for a Calorian princess. Should she be visiting alien ships with only minimal escort? Would her father approve? But then she looked at Marcus's genuine enthusiasm for showing her his world, and she decided that some rules were worth bending for the right reasons. The human ship Defiant was even more impressive up close than it had been from the observation deck. Its hull gleamed with a metallic finish that seemed to shift and change as they approached, and Zara could see weapon systems and sensor arrays integrated seamlessly into its design. It was clearly a warship, but there was an elegance to its construction that spoke of form following function in the most efficient way possible. "She's beautiful," Zara said as they entered the main airlock. "Thanks. She saved our lives more times than I can count," Marcus replied with obvious affection. "Would you like to see the bridge first, or would you prefer to start with the living quarters?" "The bridge, please. I'm curious about how humans organize their command structure." The bridge was smaller than Zara had expected, but felt incredibly efficient. Every surface seemed to serve multiple purposes, and the arrangement of stations suggested that the crew could work together seamlessly even under pressure. What struck her most, though, was how personal it felt. Unlike Calorian ships, which were designed to be monuments to imperial power, this space felt like it belonged to the people who worked in it. "Each station is customizable," Marcus explained, noticing her interest. "We believe that people work better when they're comfortable, so we let crew members adjust their workspaces to suit their preferences and physical needs." "That's very different from our approach," Zara admitted. "Calorian ships are built to precise specifications that emphasize uniformity and hierarchy. Both approaches have their advantages," Marcus said diplomatically. "But we found that flexibility often serves us better in unpredictable situations." As they toured the ship, Zara was struck by how lived-in it felt. The crew quarters were small, but comfortable, with personal items and decorations that reflected the individual personalities of their occupants. The common areas featured artwork from various worlds and comfortable furniture that invited relaxation rather than demanded formal behavior. "It's like a home," she said as they entered the ship's rec room. "That's exactly what it is," Marcus agreed. "When you're traveling between stars for months at a time, a A ship has to be more than just transportation. It has to be a place where people can live and work and form relationships. Otherwise, crew morale suffers and efficiency drops. They sat down on a comfortable couch, facing a large viewport that showed the stars beyond the station. For a few moments, they simply enjoyed the peaceful silence and the magnificent view. Zara found herself acutely aware of Marcus's presence beside her, the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way he seemed completely relaxed in her company. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said finally. "Of course. Why did you become a diplomat? You're clearly military trained, but you seem more interested in understanding other cultures than in conquest." Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I grew up during the early days of human space exploration, when we were still learning that the galaxy was full of other intelligent species. A lot of our first contacts didn't go well. Misunderstandings led to conflicts that could have been avoided with better communication." "You fought in wars against alien species?" "Several, unfortunately. And every time, I couldn't help thinking that most of those conflicts started because neither side really understood what the other wanted. So I decided that preventing wars was more important than winning them." "That's a very human attitude," Zara observed. "Most species see diplomacy as a tool for gaining advantage over their enemies. You seem to see it as a way of avoiding having enemies in the first place." "Exactly. The universe is dangerous enough without intelligent species fighting each other over misunderstandings." Zara felt a deep respect for his philosophy, so different from the typical Calorian approach to interstellar relations. Her people tended to see other species as potential threats to be contained or resources to be exploited. The idea of seeking genuine understanding and cooperation was refreshing. "What about you?" Marcus asked. "What do you hope to accomplish as a princess of the Calorian Empire?" It was a question she had been asking herself more and more frequently lately, especially since meeting him. "I want to help my people understand that the galaxy is bigger than our empire," she said slowly. "We've been so focused on maintaining our position as a major power that we've forgotten there might be value in simply being good neighbors to other species." "That sounds like it might be an unpopular position among your nobility." "It is. Most of them think I'm naive for wanting to learn about alien cultures instead of focusing on military strategy and economic expansion. But your father seems more open-minded than that." "He is to some extent. He's the one who approved this cultural exchange, after all. But he still sees everything in terms of what benefits the empire. The idea of cooperation for its own sake is difficult for him to understand." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Change takes time, especially for civilizations as old and established as yours. But having someone like you in a position of influence could make a real difference over the long term." "Someone like me?" "Someone who sees other beings as individuals rather than just representatives of their species. Someone who's curious about the universe instead of afraid of it. Someone who believes in the possibility of genuine friendship between different peoples." The way he looked at her when he said this made Zara's heart race. There was warmth in his eyes and admiration and something deeper that made her feel like the most important person in the galaxy. "Is that what you think we could have?" she asked softly. "Friendship between our peoples?" "I hope so," Marcus replied, and his voice was equally quiet. "I think there's a lot we could learn from each other." For a moment, the air between them seemed charged with possibility. Zara found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by something she couldn't name, but didn't want to resist. Marcus seemed to be feeling the same pull, his dark eyes searching her face as if trying to memorize every detail. Then his communication device chimed, breaking the spell. "Commander, chin to the bridge," came the voice of one of his colleagues. "We have a priority message from Earth Command." Marcus sighed and stood up reluctantly. "Duty calls, I'm afraid. But thank you for spending the afternoon with me. I've learned more about Calorian culture in a few hours than I expected to learn in a week." "Thank you for showing me your ship," Zara replied, also standing. "It's been enlightening." As they walked back toward the airlock, Zara found herself wishing the afternoon could have lasted longer. She had so many more questions about human culture, about Earth, about Marcus himself. But more than that, she simply enjoyed his company in a way she had never experienced with anyone else. "Princess," Marcus said as they reached the station's corridors, "would you be interested in attending a human cultural event tomorrow evening?" We're planning a small gathering to share some of our music and literature with interested delegates. I would love to, Zara said immediately, then caught herself. That is, if my schedule permits. I'll need to check with my father's staff. Marcus smiled at her obvious enthusiasm. I hope you can make it. I think you'd enjoy human music. It's very emotional. After they parted ways, Zara found herself floating through the corridors in a haze of happiness. She had spent an entire afternoon with Marcus, learning about his ship and his people and his personal philosophy. More importantly, she had felt a connection with him that went beyond diplomatic courtesy or cultural curiosity. When he looked at her, she felt like he really saw her. Not Princess Zara of Calorian, but just Zara, an individual with her own thoughts and feelings and dreams. It was a new experience for her, and an addictive one. For the first time in her life, she understood what the human poets meant when they wrote about love. The question now was what she was going to do about it. That evening, she requested a private audience with her father, determined to gain permission to attend the human cultural event. Emperor Keldon received her in his private study, a comfortable room lined with books and artifacts from across the known galaxy. He was reading something on a datapad when she entered, but he set it aside to give her his full attention. "How did your cultural exchange go today, daughter?" he asked. "Very well, father. Commander Chun gave me a tour of their ship, and I was able to observe human technology and social organization firsthand." "And what did you learn?" "That humans are more complex than our intelligence reports suggested. They've created a society that balances individual freedom with collective responsibility in ways that might be applicable to our own social challenges." Emperor Keldon raised an eyebrow. "An interesting observation. Did you discuss anything else?" Zara hesitated, unsure how much of her personal interest she should reveal. "We talked about the possibilities for long-term cooperation between our species. Commander Chun seems to believe that our peoples could benefit from closer cultural ties. And you agree with this assessment?" "Ido. In fact, the human delegation is hosting a cultural event tomorrow evening, and I was hoping for permission to attend. It would give me another opportunity to study their social customs." Her father studied her for a long moment, and Zara had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her diplomatic language to the personal interest beneath. "Permission granted," he said finally. "But I want you to remember that you are representing our entire species at these events. Your behavior will be noted and remembered by every alien observer present." "Of course, father. I understand the responsibility." "Do you?" Emperor Keldon's tone was gentle but serious. "Zara, you're not as skilled at hiding your emotions as you think you are. It's clear that you've developed a personal interest in this human commander." Zara felt her skin flush with embarrassment and started to protest, but her father held up a hand to stop her. "I'm not disapproving," he continued. "In fact, I find your reaction quite interesting. If a member of our royal family can form a positive emotional connection with a human, it suggests that our species might indeed be compatible for long-term alliance. You're not angry? Why would I be angry? You're behaving exactly as I hoped you would, with curiosity, intelligence, and emotional honesty. These are valuable diplomatic tools, as long as they're guided by wisdom and self-control. Then, you approve of my attending their cultural event? I encourage it. Learn everything you can about their customs, their values, and their motivations. But remember, daughter, personal feelings and political reality don't always align. Be careful not to make promises that our empire cannot keep." As Zara left her father's study, she felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. She had permission to pursue her growing relationship with Marcus, but her father's warning reminded her of the larger implications of her actions. Whatever feelings were developing between them, they would have to be evaluated not just as personal emotions, but as matters of interstellar politics. For now, though, she was simply excited about tomorrow evening's cultural event. She would get to experience human music and literature, and she would get to spend more time with the fascinating man who had captured her attention so completely. She only hoped that her growing feelings wouldn't complicate the delicate diplomatic situation that was developing between their peoples. The alien girl was captivated by the human at first sight. Part 3, the human cultural event, was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. Instead of the formal, ritualized presentations that characterized most Calorian gatherings, this felt organic and alive. The humans had transformed one of the station's recreational halls into something that reminded Zara of the descriptions she had read of Earth cafes, intimate spaces where people gathered to share ideas and creative expression. Soft lighting created cozy pools of warmth throughout the room, and comfortable seating arrangements encouraged small group conversations. A raised platform at one end served as a stage, where humans took turns sharing pieces of their culture with the assembled aliens. The atmosphere was relaxed and welcoming, very different from the rigid protocols that usually governed interspecies gatherings. Zara arrived wearing a simple gown that she hoped struck the right balance between respect for the occasion and approachability. She had spent considerable time selecting it, wanting to honor human customs while still maintaining her dignity as a Calorian princess. The deep blue fabric complemented her natural coloring, and the style was elegant without being ostentatious. Marcus was near the entrance when she arrived, greeting guests and ensuring everyone felt comfortable. When he saw her, his face lit up with genuine pleasure that made her heart skip a beat. "Princess Zara, I'm so glad you could make it," he said, approaching her with that warm smile she was beginning to treasure. "You look beautiful this evening." "Thank you," she replied, pleased that her voice remained steady despite the flutter of excitement his compliment caused. "This is a fascinating setup, very different from our formal cultural presentations." "That's the idea. We found that people are more receptive to new experiences when they feel relaxed and welcome. Would you like me to introduce you to some of the other guests?" As they moved through the room, Marcus introduced her to various beings, scientists, traders, diplomats, and explorers from dozens of different worlds. What struck Zara was how easily he interacted with each species, adapting his manner to make everyone feel included. He wasn't just performing diplomatic duties. He genuinely seemed to enjoy meeting new people and learning about their perspectives. "You're very good at this," she observed as they paused near a group of crystalline beings who were discussing human poetry with evident fascination. "At what?" "Making everyone feel welcome, creating connections between beings who might otherwise have nothing in common." Marcus looked thoughtful. "I suppose it comes from growing up on a world where cooperation is essential for survival. When everyone you meet might be the person who saved your life someday, you learn to look for common ground rather than focusing on differences." Before Zara could respond, the human ambassador called for attention from the small stage. "Friends and colleagues, we'd like to begin this evening's program with something very special to human culture: music. Our communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Volkov, will perform a song that tells the story of humanity's journey to the stars." A young woman with short auburn hair took the stage, carrying what appeared to be a stringed instrument unlike anything Zara had ever seen. She settled onto a simple stool and began to play, her fingers moving across the strings to create sounds that seemed to capture the very essence of longing and hope. Then she began to sing. The human voice was an instrument in itself, Zara realized with wonder. The woman's voice rose and fell with the melody, carrying emotions that needed no translation. Even though the words were in a human language Zara didn't recognize, she could feel the story being told, of people looking up at distant stars and dreaming of the worlds that waited among them, of the courage required to leave everything familiar behind, of the joy of discovering that the universe was vast and full of wonders. Zara felt tears forming in her eyes as the song reached its crescendo. She glanced around and saw that she wasn't the only one affected. Beings from a dozen different species were listening with rapt attention, many showing signs of deep emotional response. "That was Song of the Voyagers," Marcus said quietly as the music faded. "It was written during our early space exploration period, when we first began to dream of meeting other intelligent species." "It's beautiful," Zara whispered. "I've never heard anything like it." "Music is one of the few truly universal languages," Marcus explained. "Every species we've encountered has some form of musical expression, even if it's very different from ours. It seems to speak to something fundamental about consciousness itself." The evening continued with various forms of human cultural expression. There was poetry that painted vivid pictures with words, storytelling that transformed simple narratives into epic adventures, and demonstrations of visual arts that showed how humans perceive the universe around them. Each presentation revealed new facets of human creativity and imagination. But what impressed Zara most was how interactive everything was. Unlike Calorian cultural events, where the audience was expected to observe in respectful silence, the humans encouraged questions and discussion. They wanted to know how their art affected other species, what emotions it evoked, what aspects of human experience it successfully communicated. During a break in the formal program, Marcus approached her again. "Would you like to step outside for some fresh air? The observation deck has a spectacular view of the nebula at this time of night." Zara nodded eagerly, grateful for the chance to have a private conversation with him. As they walked through the station's corridors, she found herself thinking about everything she had experienced that evening. "Your people are remarkable," she said as they emerged onto the observation deck. "The way you use art to communicate complex emotions and ideas, it's unlike anything in Calorian culture. How do your people express creativity?" Marcus asked, settling beside her on one of the benches that faced the vast windows. "Traditionally, our art has been more focused on demonstrating technical skill and adherence to established forms," Zara admitted. "Beauty is appreciated, but it's secondary to precision and proper execution. What I experienced tonight, that kind of raw emotional expression, it's not something we typically encourage." "That seems like a loss," Marcus said gently. "Some of humanity's greatest achievements have come from people who are willing to break established rules and express themselves authentically." Zara was quiet for a moment, watching the swirling colors of the nebula beyond the station. "I've been thinking about that a lot since meeting you and your people, about the value of individual expression versus collective harmony. It doesn't have to be an either-or choice," Marcus pointed out. "The best human communities find ways to balance individual creativity with social responsibility." "Is that what you're doing? Balancing your personal desires with your duty as a diplomat?" The question was more personal than she had intended, but Marcus didn't seem offended by it. Instead, he looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Sometimes balance is harder to achieve than others," he said quietly. "Sometimes personal desires and professional duties come into conflict." "Are they in conflict now?" "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because my duty is to maintain proper diplomatic relations with your people. But my personal desire is to tell you that you're the most fascinating, intelligent, and beautiful being I've ever met." Zara felt her breath catch in her throat. The crystal patterns on her skin began to glow more brightly, betraying her emotional response despite her attempts to maintain composure. "Marcus," she began, then stopped, unsure what to say. She wanted to tell him that she felt the same way, that every moment in his presence made her understand things about herself and about love that she had never imagined possible. But the weight of her position, of her responsibilities to her people and her father, held her back. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, apparently misreading her silence. "I shouldn't have said that. It's not appropriate given our respective positions." "No," Zara said quickly. "Don't apologize. I'm glad you told me, because I need you to know that the feeling is mutual." Now, it was Marcus's turn to look surprised. "Really? From the moment I first saw you stepping off your ship, something changed for me. I've spent my whole life learning about diplomatic protocols and political strategies, but no one ever taught me what to do when you meet someone who makes you forget about everything except how much you want to know them better." Marcus moved closer to her on the bench, close enough that she could see the warmth in his dark eyes, close enough to catch the subtle scent that was uniquely his. "What do we do now?" he asked. "I don't know," Zara admitted. "This is all new territory for me. Calorian princesses don't typically fall in love with alien diplomats, and human commanders don't typically fall for alien royalty either," Marcus said with a rueful smile. "But maybe that's exactly why it feels so right. We're both breaking new ground here." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars and processing the significance of what they had just admitted to each other. Zara felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror at having acknowledged her feelings out loud. There was no taking it back now. They both knew where they stood. "What happens next?" she asked finally. "I suppose that depends on what we want to happen," Marcus replied. "And what we think is possible given the constraints we're both operating under. My father seems surprisingly supportive of human Calorian cooperation," Zara said thoughtfully. He's encouraged my cultural exchanges with your delegation. But there's a difference between cultural cooperation and personal relationships, Marcus pointed out, especially when one of the people involved is a princess who will someday have significant influence over interstellar politics. True, but maybe that's exactly why this matters so much. If we can prove that humans and Calorians can form genuine emotional bonds, it could change how our species relate to each other. Marcus looked at her with growing excitement. You're talking about more than just a personal relationship. You're talking about becoming a symbol of what's possible between our peoples. Is that too much pressure to put on what we feel for each other? Maybe, but maybe it's also an opportunity to turn something beautiful into something historically significant. They were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Thex emerged onto the observation deck, his massive form silhouetted against the starlight. "Princess," he rumbled, "your father requests your presence in the diplomatic quarters." There's been a development. Zara felt a stab of anxiety. Had someone reported her growing relationship with Marcus? Was her father having second thoughts about the cultural exchange program? "What kind of development?" she asked, standing up. "A message from Calorian High Command. I wasn't given details, but the Emperor seemed concerned." Marcus stood as well, his demeanor shifting subtly from personal to professional. "If there's anything the human delegation can do to assist, please don't hesitate to ask." Thex studied the human commander for a moment, his reptilian features unreadable. "Thank you, Commander. Your offer is noted." As they walked back through the station's corridors, Zara's mind raced with possibilities. What could High Command want that would cause her father concern? Were they being recalled to Calorian space? Had there been some kind of military incident that would affect the diplomatic negotiations? The diplomatic quarters were bustling with activity when they arrived. Calorian staff members moved with the quick, efficient motions that indicated a crisis situation, and Zara could see the telltale glow of emergency communications protocols on various display screens. Emperor Keldon was in the main conference room, studying a holographic star chart with several of his senior advisors. When Zara entered, he looked up with an expression that mixed concern with determination. "Daughter, thank you for coming so quickly," he said. "We've received intelligence that changes the nature of our negotiations with the humans." "What kind of intelligence, Father?" "It appears that humanity has been much more active in our region of space than we realized. Our scouts have discovered evidence of human exploration missions in several systems along our border, systems that we considered to be within our sphere of influence." Zara felt a cold, not forming in her stomach. "Are you suggesting the humans are planning territorial expansion?" "That's one interpretation," Emperor Keldon replied. "But there are others. It's possible they're simply being thorough in their exploration efforts, or that they're investigating threats that could affect both our species." "What does High Command recommend?" "They want us to confront the human delegation directly, to demand explanations for these incursions into our territory. Some of my advisors are suggesting we should suspend negotiations until we have satisfactory answers." Zara's mind immediately went to Marcus and the conversations they had shared about human motivations and philosophy. Everything she had learned about him and his people suggested they were more interested in cooperation than conquest. "Father, may I make a suggestion?" "Of course. Before we make any accusations or demands, perhaps we should give the humans an opportunity to explain their activities voluntarily. For what I've observed of their culture, they value honesty and direct communication. If we approach them with suspicion and threats, we might damage our relationship unnecessarily." Emperor Keldon considered her words carefully. "You're suggesting we test their sincerity by giving them a chance to be forthcoming about their activities?" "Exactly. If they're planning something aggressive, they'll try to deflect or misdirect our questions. But if their intentions are genuinely peaceful, they'll be open about their exploration activities. And what if they lie to us? Then we'll know where we stand, and we can respond accordingly. But at least we'll have given diplomacy a chance to work before resorting to confrontation." One of the Emperor's advisors, an elderly Calorian named Veltar, spoke up. "Your Majesty, the princess makes a valid point. If we accuse the humans of territorial violations without giving them a chance to explain, we risk appearing aggressive ourselves. Other species observing these negotiations might interpret our behavior as evidence that the Calorian Empire is more interested in dominance than cooperation. Emperor Keldon nodded slowly. Very well, Zara. Since you've developed the best understanding of human psychology among our delegation, I want you to participate in tomorrow's meeting with their ambassador. Your insights could be valuable in determining whether their explanations are genuine. As the meeting broke up and the various advisors returned to their quarters, Zara found herself alone with her father. The weight of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. She was being asked to help evaluate the honesty of the man she was falling in love with. "Father," she said carefully, "what if the humans' explanations are satisfactory? What if their exploration activities are truly peaceful? Then we continue with the negotiations and work toward a formal alliance," Emperor Keldon replied. "But, Zara, you need to understand the larger implications here. If we enter into a military alliance with humanity, we're committing our empire to a partnership that could last for centuries. We need to be absolutely certain that we could trust them. I understand. Do you? Because I've noticed your growing personal interest in Commander Chen. I need to know that you can evaluate his people's actions objectively, regardless of your feelings for him." It was the direct question she had been dreading. Zara took a deep breath before answering. "Father, my feelings for Marcus, for Commander Chen, haven't blinded me to my responsibilities. If anything, they've given me additional insight into human nature and motivations. I believe I can provide an objective assessment of their explanations." Emperor Keldon studied her face for a long moment, apparently satisfied by what he saw there. "Very well. But remember, daughter, tomorrow's meeting isn't just about diplomatic relations. It's about determining whether your personal feelings are based on genuine understanding or on wishful thinking." After leaving her father's quarters, Zara walked slowly back to her own rooms, her mind churning with conflicting emotions. Part of her was excited about playing a more significant role in the diplomatic process. But another part was terrified by the implications of what she had learned. What if Marcus and his people had been lying to her? What if their expressions of friendship and cooperation were just diplomatic facades hiding more aggressive intentions? The thought made her feel physically ill, not just because it would mean the end of their developing relationship, but because it would mean she had been completely wrong about everything she thought she understood about human nature. But as she replayed her conversations with Marcus, she couldn't bring herself to believe he had been deceptive. The emotion she had seen in his eyes, the passion in his voice when he talked about cooperation and understanding, those things felt too genuine to be manufactured. Tomorrow's meeting would test everything she had come to believe about humans in general and Marcus in particular. She only hoped that her faith in him wouldn't turn out to be misplaced. Sleep came fitfully that night, filled with dreams of starships and diplomatic conferences and warm brown eyes that looked at her with an expression she desperately hoped she hadn't imagined. The alien girl was captivated by the human at first sight. Part 4, the diplomatic meeting convened in the main conference chamber at what humans called high noon, a time reference that Zara found charmingly specific to their home-world cycles. She arrived early, wanting to observe the setup and prepare herself mentally for what could be the most important conversation of her diplomatic career. The chamber had been arranged in the traditional neutral format, with representatives from both sides seated across from each other at a long table. The human delegation looked professional, but relaxed, while the Calorian side maintained the formal bearing expected of imperial representatives. Zara took her assigned seat beside her father, acutely aware that Marcus was directly across from her. When their eyes met, she saw concern in his expression. He had clearly sensed that something had changed since their conversation on the observation deck, though he couldn't know exactly what. Zara tried to project calm confidence, but she suspected her emotional turmoil was more obvious than she hoped. Emperor Keldon opened the meeting with diplomatic formality. "Honored representatives of the Terran Federation, we have received information that requires clarification before our negotiations can continue productively." Ambassador Harrison, the senior human diplomat, leaned forward slightly. "Of course, Your Majesty. We're committed to complete transparency in our discussions. What information concerns you?" "Our intelligence network has detected human ships conducting exploration activities in several star systems along our mutual border. These systems have traditionally been considered within the Calorian sphere of influence. We would appreciate an explanation of your activities in these regions." Zara watched the human delegation carefully, looking for any signs of evasiveness or deception. What she saw instead was a moment of recognition followed by what appeared to be relief. Ambassador Harrison exchanged glances with her colleagues before responding. "Your Majesty, we're grateful for the opportunity to address this directly. Yes, we have been conducting exploration missions in those systems, and we should have informed you of our activities as a courtesy. The oversight was unintentional, and we apologize for any concern it may have caused. Can you explain the purpose of these missions?" Emperor Keldon asked. It was Marcus who answered, and Zara felt her heart's race as he leaned forward to address her father directly. "Your Majesty, approximately 6 months ago, our long-range sensors detected anomalous energy readings from several systems in that region. The signatures were consistent with either advanced alien technology or natural phenomena that could pose a threat to shipping lanes. Given that these are the same routes that Calorian vessels use for trade with neutral systems, we felt it was important to investigate." "Why didn't you contact us about these readings?" one of the Calorian advisors asked. Ambassador Harrison answered this time. "At that point, we had not yet established formal diplomatic contact with your empire. Our standing orders for such situations are to investigate potential threats ourselves rather than alarm other species unnecessarily. In retrospect, we should have reached out to you once we confirmed that these were systems of interest to the Calorian Empire." Zara studied Marcus's face as the explanations continued, and everything she saw supported the honesty of their words. There was no defensive posturing, no evasive language, no signs of the stress that typically accompany deception. Instead, she saw the same straightforward sincerity that had characterized all of their interactions. "What did your investigations discover?" Emperor Keldon inquired. Marcus activated a holographic display that showed detailed sensor readings and star charts. The energy signatures appear to be coming from ancient automated defense platforms of unknown origin. They're not currently active, but our analysis suggests they could be triggered by large-scale military movements in the region. The implications hit Zara immediately. If there were dormant defense systems along the border between human and Calorian space, they could pose a threat to both species' shipping and exploration activities. "Have you been able to determine who built these platforms?" she asked. "Not yet," Marcus replied, his eyes meeting hers with unmistakable warmth despite the formal setting. "The technology is unlike anything in our databases. It could be a remnant from one of the ancient civilizations that predated current galactic society, or it could be something more recent that we simply haven't encountered before." Emperor Keldon leaned back in his chair, considering the implications. "And you're planning to inform us of these discoveries?" "Absolutely," Ambassador Harrison confirmed. "In fact, one of the items on our negotiation agenda was to propose a joint investigation of these anomalies. We believe that cooperation between our species' scientific and military resources would be the most effective approach to understanding and neutralizing any potential threats." Zara felt a wave of relief wash over her. Not only were the humans being completely honest about their activities, but they were actively proposing the kind of cooperation that could strengthen the relationship between their peoples. Her faith in Marcus and his people had been justified. "This is precisely the kind of information sharing that builds trust between allies," she said, addressing both delegations. "The fact that humanity discovered a potential threat to both our peoples and immediately began planning to share that information with us demonstrates the value of closer cooperation." Emperor Keldon nodded approvingly. "I agree. However, I would like to propose that we formalize this cooperation immediately rather than waiting for the conclusion of our broader negotiations. If these defense platforms pose a genuine threat, delay could be costly. We would welcome immediate cooperation," Ambassador Harrison replied. "What did you have in mind?" "A joint exploration mission with ships and personnel from both our species working together to investigate these anomalies thoroughly. It would serve as a practical test of our ability to collaborate while also addressing a genuine security concern." Zara felt her excitement growing as the details of the joint mission were discussed. This was exactly the kind of breakthrough she had hoped for, a concrete demonstration that humans and Calorians could work together as equals rather than competitors. But more than that, it meant she would have legitimate reasons to continue working closely with Marcus. Whatever was developing between them personally could now proceed within the framework of professional cooperation. As the meeting concluded with agreements to begin planning the joint mission immediately, Zara noticed that the atmosphere in the room had changed completely. What had begun as a tense confrontation had transformed into enthusiastic collaboration. The humans' honesty and willingness to share vital intelligence had not only resolved the immediate concern, but had actually strengthened the foundation for long-term alliance. After the formal session ended and the various delegations began breaking into smaller working groups, Marcus approached her. "Princess, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" he asked. "I'd like to discuss some of the cultural considerations for the joint mission." Zara nodded, recognizing the diplomatic language, for we need to talk about personal matters. They found a quiet alcove overlooking the station's main thoroughfare, with a constant flow of alien travelers provided a backdrop of normalcy. "I was worried this morning," Marcus admitted. "You seemed distant, and I was afraid something had changed between us." "Something had changed," Zara replied honestly. "I learned about your exploration activities, and for a few hours, I had to consider the possibility that everything you had told me about human intentions was not entirely accurate." Marcus looked stricken. "Zara, I hope you understand that we never intended to deceive anyone about our activities. The failure to inform your government was an oversight, not a deliberate omission." "I believe you," she said, reaching out to touch his arm. "What happened in there, the way you and your delegation handled my father's questions, it proved everything I believed about human honesty and integrity. So we're all right? You and I mean?" Zara smiled, feeling the last of her anxiety fade away. "Well, more than all right. In fact, I think we're about to get some very interesting opportunities to work together." "The joint mission?" "Exactly. As cultural liaisons, we'll need to ensure that human and Calorian personnel can work effectively together. That will require extensive cooperation between us." Marcus grinned. "I do love it when personal interests align with professional duties." Over the next several days, the joint mission planning proceeded with remarkable efficiency. Zara found herself working closely with Marcus and several other human officers, developing protocols for mixed crews and establishing communication procedures that would work for both species. What impressed her most was how naturally the humans adapted to Calorian organizational methods, while also sharing their own approaches to problem-solving. There was no sense of cultural superiority or attempts to impose human standards on their Calorian partners. Instead, both sides seemed genuinely interested in learning from each other. "Your people have a remarkable talent for synthesis," she observed during one of their planning sessions. "You take the best elements from different approaches and combine them into something new. It's a survival skill," Marcus explained. "When you're dealing with hostile environments and unknown threats on a regular basis, flexibility and adaptation become essential. Rigid thinking gets you killed." "Is that how you approach relationships as well? With flexibility and adaptation?" They were alone in the planning room, having worked later than the rest of their colleagues. The question was more personal than their usual professional discussions, but Zara felt comfortable enough with Marcus now to explore these deeper topics. "To some extent, yes," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "But there are some things that shouldn't be compromised or adapted away. Core values, fundamental respect, genuine affection. Those need to remain constant even when circumstances change." "And what are your core values when it comes to relationships?" Marcus considered the question seriously before answering. "Honesty, mutual respect, shared growth, and the willingness to put the other person's well-being ahead of your own convenience." "What about you?" "I've never really thought about it before," Zara admitted. "Calorian relationships are typically arranged based on genetic compatibility and political advantage. The idea of choosing a partner based on personal values and emotional connection is still very new to me. But you're open to exploring it? With the right person, yes. Someone who challenges me to think differently, who introduces me to new perspectives, who makes me want to become better than I am." The way Marcus looked at her when she said this made it clear he understood exactly what she meant. They were no longer talking in hypotheticals. "Zara," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something important. When this diplomatic mission is over and we both return to our respective worlds, what happens to us?" It was the question she had been dreading, because she didn't have a good answer. The practical obstacles to a relationship between a human commander and a Calorian princess were enormous. They lived on different worlds, served different governments, and operated within vastly different cultural contexts. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I think the joint mission might give us some answers. If humans and Calorians can work together successfully in space, maybe individuals from our species can find ways to build personal relationships as well." "You're suggesting we use the mission as a test case?" "Among other things, yes. If we can function effectively as a team in challenging circumstances, it would demonstrate that our differences are manageable rather than insurmountable." Marcus nodded slowly. "And if we can't? If the cultural gaps prove too wide to bridge, then at least we'll know we tried," Zara replied. "But, Marcus, I need you to understand something. Whatever happens between us personally, this mission has to succeed. The future relationship between our species may depend on it." "Agreed. Professional success first, personal considerations second." But even as they made this commitment, Zara knew that separating their professional and personal relationships was going to be more difficult than either of them acknowledged. The feelings growing between them were too strong to compartmentalize easily. The joint mission launched 3 days later with a combined fleet of 6 ships, 3 human and 3 Calorian. Zara found herself assigned to the human flagship Defiant as a cultural liaison, while Marcus served as the mission's overall tactical coordinator. Working together in the same ship would give them unprecedented opportunities to observe how well their species could cooperate under pressure. The first few days of the mission went smoothly. The mixed crews adapted to each other's working styles more easily than anyone had expected, and the investigation of the anomalous energy readings proceeded according to schedule. Zara was impressed by how quickly the human and Calorian personnel learned to communicate effectively despite their different approaches to hierarchy and decision-making. But it was the personal side of the mission that proved most revealing. Working alongside Marcus in a professional capacity gave Zara new insights into his character and capabilities. She watched him coordinate complex tactical maneuvers with patience and precision, mediate disputes between crew members with fairness and wisdom, and maintain morale during long, tedious sensor sweeps with humor and encouragement. Everything she observed reinforced her growing conviction that he was exactly the kind of person she wanted in her life permanently. The feelings seemed to be mutual. Marcus sought out her opinions on important decisions, included her in strategic planning sessions, and made it clear that he valued her insights and judgment. More importantly, he treated her as an equal partner rather than as an exotic alien princess to be managed or accommodated. It was during the investigation of the third anomalous system that their relationship was put to its most significant test. The automated defense platforms they discovered proved to be more dangerous than anyone had anticipated, and what had begun as a routine survey mission suddenly became a fight for survival. The ancient platforms had activated in response to the presence of multiple ships, and their weapons technology was far more advanced than anything either the humans or Calorians had encountered before. Within minutes, the joint fleet found itself under attack by energy beams that could slice through modern shields like paper. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Marcus commanded from the Defiance bridge. Pattern Delta 7, maximum dispersal. Zara watched in fascination as the human and Calorian ships moved in perfect coordination despite having trained together for only a few days. The tactical doctrine they had developed combined the best elements of both species' military traditions, and it showed in the fluid grace of their maneuvering. But even working together, they were clearly outmatched by the ancient technology. 2 ships had already taken significant damage, and the weapons platforms showed no signs of powering down. "We need to find their control center," Zara said, studying the sensor readings. "These platforms are too sophisticated to be operating independently. There has to be a command node somewhere." Marcus nodded grimly. "Agreed, but where? We've scanned every platform in the system, and none of them show the kind of complex internal structure you'd expect from Control Center. What about beneath the surface of the 4th planet? The energy readings, they're different from the others." "It's possible, but getting close enough to investigate would require taking a ship through the platform's fire zone. We'd never make it." Zara felt a sudden inspiration. "What if we didn't use a ship? What if we used the cultural exchange protocols we developed to establish a join-away team? A small group might be able to slip past the platform's sensors and reach the planet's surface. It was a desperate plan, but Marcus immediately began working out the tactical details. Within an hour, a joint team of human and Calorian personnel was preparing for what could be the most dangerous mission any of them had ever undertaken. And Zara had volunteered to lead the Calorian contingent. Absolutely not, Marcus said when he learned of her decision. This is too dangerous for a diplomatic observer. I'm not just a diplomatic observer, Zara replied firmly. I'm a trained officer of the Imperial Guard, and I have more experience with ancient technology than anyone else on this mission. Besides,